Today we're going to talk about essentially why history matters to each and every one of us, regardless of your major. So to kick off, I want to share a quote of Indian origin. And it basically, and I may be paraphrasing it because I didn't write it down, it says, "You can't wake a man pretending to be asleep." So you can't wake a man pretending to be asleep. Therefore, if you're pretending to be asleep according to the origins of this saying, you intentionally ignore your surroundings. You go out of your way to not know why certain things happen. Now, selfishly, as a history professor, I honestly believe that those questions lie in history, as I'm sure sociology and English and psychology and education professors feel the same way. But it is important to know the things that you do not know. And that is what I want to share with you today. Those of you who have had me as a student know that I very rarely use absolutes. I don't say always, I don't say never. But I want to share with you the most important constitutional convention in the history of America, of this country. And I honestly believe that to be true. And it just so happens that it involves the state that we are in. So just to get a cue, this is interactive. How many of you are from the state of Georgia? Okay, good crowd, good crowd. Are y'all familiar with Georgia history? Okay, not as confident. All right. So we're going to go all the way back to the year 1867. What's the world like in 1867? Slavery? No civil rights? No? No air conditioning? Post-Civil War, social Reconstruction, right? That's correct. So the state of Georgia, as a way to cope from the Civil War, had undergone the process of Reconstruction, that meaning that they were allowed back into the United States. But the government passes a series of black codes, which are laws targeting black individuals and their rights. As a result, we anger the federal Congress, and they kick us out again. So we have to undergo a new process of Reconstruction beginning in 1867. In order to do that, we have to rewrite the state constitution. The process of that is to vote for delegates to go to the Constitution. This vote in late 1867 is the first time that black men are allowed to vote inside the state of Georgia. And they vote for delegates to go to Milledgeville to rewrite the Constitution, right? And in this Constitution, they have to ban slavery, among other things. So this is a very important document. So when we talk about the civil rights program, right, it's the idea of getting the right to vote. So if we have that in 1867, we are very much talking about civil rights, right? We are very much talking about the destruction of slavery, right, and the reconstruction of the South. And as we have this election, here in Albany, a black man by the name of Philip Joyner is going to be elected to go to this constitutional convention. But when they get to Milledgeville, have anybody ever been to Milledgeville? Did y'all know it used to be the state capital? Not as confident? Okay, 1, 2 people. Well, when the delegates arrive, no hotel will open up rooms to the black delegates to the Constitutional Convention. So as a whole, at the last minute, they send telegrams to cities around the state, and the first one to respond that they would allow hotel rooms for the black delegates is Atlanta. And that is how Atlanta becomes the state capital. A matter of fact, that is written into the Constitution. But when they arrive in Atlanta and they start arguing, the pressing argument that I want to cover today, because we can't cover everything or we'll be here longer than anyone will want to be here, is whether a black man can hold office in Georgia. And this debate goes on for a lot longer than you probably want to admit. So, in the context of things, what do you think in 1867, 1868, what did these white men and black men think about black men holding office? They feel threatened. Who's the historian? Who's the historian of the group? You got an answer for me? No. So even the most radical of the black politicians don't really feel it is necessary to have it written into the Constitution that black men can hold office, because there's nothing written in any previous Constitution that specifically says white men can hold office. It's always been understood that if you can vote and you meet the requirements for office holding, then you can do it regardless of what you look like, right? So at the end of the debate, it was decided that there was no use in writing this statute into the Constitution of 1868 because it wasn't necessary, right? So they go on, they write stuff in there about banning slavery, about statehood, an oath to the United States of America. We adopt the 13th Amendment, and everything that the federal government requires, we do into the Constitution of 1868. And then April of 1868, that Constitution goes to the people, right, to vote. So now it's the second opportunity for black men to vote in Georgia. Now there are two political parties, right? There's Republicans and there's Democrats. And the April election of 1868 is going to be boycotted by the Democratic Party, which means every person who shows up to vote is going to be a Republican, and they're going to vote in favor of the Constitution of 1868. So it is going to pass. And as that happens, they also vote for politicians. So as I mentioned, Philip Joyner from Albany in April of 1868 is going to be sent to the new capital of Atlanta to be a state representative in the state government. So we have the second time black men can vote, but the first time they can be voted on as official politicians, and he wins. And he goes off in April to Atlanta, and he does a pretty good job. Fast forward to September. We are nearing the federal election of 1868, in which we're going to have a presidential election, in which Ulysses S. Grant is going to win. But as politicians campaign for this, the people in Atlanta, Republicans and Democrats alike, are going to do what we call the September Purge. And at the September Purge in 1868, all politicians of black ethnicity are going to be kicked out of the Georgia state legislature because there's no provision in the Constitution of 1868 that allows a black man to hold office. So what they debated on for months, from 1867 to 1868, and they were told it was not important, it was not necessary, comes back in September to be the reason that they are kicked out of the government. So now people like Philip Joyner are going to have to go campaign without being an incumbent, right? And when you're campaigning, being an incumbent matters, because if things are going well and they see an I next to your name, you're going to get a lot of votes. But people in their own party and the party that they run against are going to work together to get them kicked out. And just to add one little anecdote of how ridiculous this is, there was one person who survived the September Purge for a few weeks because they had to determine how black he actually was. Ultimately, they decided he was black enough and they kicked him out too. So all 32 black politicians are going to be purged in September from the state legislature. they are forced to campaign again. And so imagine putting yourself in that. You've worked to get what you want. And if you're a politician, you want to be elected. You want to win, right? That is what your dream is. That is your goal. And now, as it's campaign season, and now in modern days, there's constant campaigning, right? But back then, you only campaigned right before the election. So now in September, it is time to campaign. They have to go out and campaign. How do you get from one town to another in 1868? You what? In the rural South. I love the animation. So what are you saying? Is that a horse cart? Is that what that means? You're riding a horse in a cart? Somebody said walk. Who said walk? Okay, yeah. You're going to walk. So 300 people on September the 15th are going to leave Albany and head to Americus. And in Americus, they're going to have issues. But the people of Americus on September the 15th, they promised to protect blacks at the event if the black Republicans turn over white politicians. So if you turn over the people that you were there to hear, we will guarantee your safety. Ultimately, the Freedmen's Bureau allowed for the white politicians to safely hide out, and once night falls, they sneak out of town and go right back to Albany. And when they arrive in Albany around September the 18th, they don't give up, right? They go right back out to campaign. And so the evening of September the 18th, roughly that same 300 or the same number is going to start walking from Albany down to Camilla, some 30 miles. They camp out about halfway, get up the next morning and finish it. Once they arrive on the courthouse square, the townspeople were waiting on them with armed weapons. And so for those of you who are going to take the trip, you can see how the courthouse is laid out. It's kind of a blind spot until you make a turn. You can see the stores on one side and the stores over here, which aren't missing. But you can kind of see how that would make an L shape. And those people were there to shoot in both directions as soon as everyone arrived. The reason they did that is because propaganda was spread weeks in advance about the intentions of black marchers into Camilla. They're there to steal. They're there to rob. They're there to take over. All the things I'm sure you still hear when there's a riot on television is nothing new. The intentions of the group were not great, so therefore they had to prepare to protect their hometown, right? Ultimately, the shots are fired, and depending on statistics, at least one white person dies, and anywhere between 12 and 200 black people are going to die. But the official number for the Camila Massacre is 12 blacks who die. We will never know, or we will likely never know, the exact number of people. And the reason for that goes to the census. I'm sure you've heard the Census Bureau, every 10 years, they count the number of people in any given area. So in 1860, if they were enslaved, they were only listed as a number. And it wasn't until 1870 where these names would be listed for the first time. Had the names existed in 1860, we could just compare 1870 to 1860 and know who's missing and why, right? But because of the way in which we treated African Americans in 1860 and before, under the legal guise of enslavement, we don't know how many people died once they became citizens of the United States of America. And because of that, it adds to the family trauma that is the Camila Massacre. Earlier this year, we undertake a family history project of different Georgians who are famous. I selected Philip Joyner. I wanted to find his family because he's someone that I've been studying for 10 years. He's famous to me. All we could find was one of his parents and his 2 children, and the bloodline falls off after that. We don't know if anybody today is related to him. And that is the ultimate tragedy that becomes Reconstruction and the fight in the first round of civil rights in Southwest Georgia. For those of you going on the trip on Friday, you will be able to see, at least for a short period of way, the path that was taken on September 19th, 1868. The turn that they made, where they ended up, and we'll talk about what happens after they leave, right? They're going to be hunted down for weeks and months at a time. All because they wanted to vote. They wanted to cast a ballot for someone who believed that they deserved rights. They wanted to walk 30 miles beside someone who was talking. They could talk to them the whole way. But it was important to be there. They knew the risk. They saw that in Americus. They understood that it was a violent place. The Klan was not new in 1868. They understood it. George Ashburn, years earlier, was the first victim of the Klan. He was a white Republican politician. They understood the risk, and they did it anyway. So afterwards, when they make it back to from Camilla to Albany, they don't stop. They plan another trip to another town for the very next week. They would not let anything turn them around, to stop them, right? And that is the untold story of Southwest Georgia's civil rights pioneers that I hope that you will have a little bit of today, and we'll finish that story on Friday. And I welcome any questions from any of you at this time.
From Albany to Americus, where they were waiting with guns. Did you mean Camilla?
The first trip was to Americus. I don't really know the exact intentions in Americus as far as how many guns there were. Their intention was to kill the 3 white people who were there. So how they were wanting to do that, I'm not sure. They didn't want to open up a mass shooting, which what happens in Camilla. I think they were more geared towards torture. Like, I want to punish you for wanting to do this, because they saw Southern Republicans as the ultimate race traitors in America. Like, they felt like they were worse than the people who were there to hear them. And it is the exact opposite in Camilla. To expand on that, if I can take a few minutes, the guns used in the Camilla Massacre were sent south on the train from Albany under the Young Men's Democratic Club, which is code for the Klan, but a professional offshoot of that. So it is also believed that on that same train there was a lot of alcohol sent south. So you have propaganda, alcohol, and free guns and ammunition just sitting there while you hear day after day what the intention of this group is going to be. And all it took was one person to start it, and his name is James Johns. He's the one who gets like really, really angry and fires the first shot. But in honesty, it could have been anyone under those circumstances. And the way I look at it in terms of methodology is kind of a zero-sum game. Like, they felt like they were losing rights because blacks were gaining more rights. And so you already have a sense of loss, and you couple that with the propaganda and the anger that comes from that, and it just boils over into this event. Is that it? All right. I'm going to do one thing. All right. It is my sincere hope that as many of you who have an interest in history or understanding the world around you will take this trip on Friday and learn more about the area that we live in. It's typically associated with the civil rights movement, but the roots of history and black history and the civil rights era in Southwest Georgia goes back many, many decades.
Like 19, and which is that like road they come in on? So, like, I'm from Camilla, so I know this is that courthouse that you're talking about.
They would have walked down Radium Springs and came up by Crispy Chick.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And
okay, that way.
So they're walking this way, and then they're going to turn.
Have a seat, it's not over.
Yeah, they're going to turn into or onto 37, right?
Gotcha.
Like they're going towards Newton. And when they do that, there's going to be shooters over here where the stores still exist. But there's another line of stores on this side that do not exist anymore. It's where PNC Bank is, that top corner there, right?
Okay.
And so when they turn, they could be shot from this way or from behind.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, they walk that way. So I think on the bus we're going to take some of the way. I don't think we're going to go all the way down Radium Springs. There was one donkey cart, not a horse cart, but that was just for the politicians, and there was another one that joined later for the band. The rest of them walked.
It is really, really important to at least have that experience that someone is telling you a history and you can be in it. That's the way we've done from the civil rights movement. But it is really, really important to have that moment that you can actually point to something and have some history about it.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm working on now is about the idea that every spot has a history, right? And where we are going to go has history that spans from the 1860s through the 1960s, and there's a very important event that happens there every generation.